He told me I was dead to him right there in front of everyone at his wedding reception. But what I discovered afterward made me realize cutting him out of my will was just the beginning. I'm grateful you're here to listen. Stay with me until the end and comment which state you're watching from so I can see how far this story reaches. At 70 years old, I thought I'd experienced every variety of heartbreak that life could deliver. I'd held my husband Gerald's hand as cancer took him from me after 42 years of marriage. I'd survived my own battle with breast cancer, enduring surgeries and treatments that left me weaker, but determined to keep living. I'd watched my younger son, Trevor, pack up his life and move to Seattle for a tech job, putting 2,000 miles between us. But nothing in those 7 decades prepared me for the soul-crushing pain of being systematically erased by my eldest son on what should have been one of the most joyful days of his life. My name is Barbara Reichman, and I spent 30 years working as an administrative assistant at Riverside Community College in Ohio, raising 2 boys on a modest salary after Gerald's accounting firm let him go during the 2008 financial crisis. We never had much money, but our home in Maple Heights was filled with love, laughter, and the smell of whatever I was baking that day. Gerald always said I could make a feast out of leftovers and turn any occasion into a celebration with nothing more than flour, sugar, and determination. Marcus, my eldest, had always been my golden child. Not because I loved him more than Trevor, but because he seemed to carry the weight of our family's hopes on his shoulders from an early age. When Gerald lost his job and spiraled into depression, 12-year-old Marcus became the man of the house in ways no child should have to. He helped with Trevor, worked odd jobs around the neighborhood, and never complained when we couldn't afford the brand-name sneakers or the school trips his classmates enjoyed. He channeled all that hardship into ambition. Full scholarship to Ohio State University, then Northwestern Law School, graduating in the top 10% of his class. By 35, he was a junior partner at Kensington and Rothmore, one of Chicago's most prestigious corporate law firms. He'd bought himself a penthouse in the Gold Coast neighborhood with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, drove a silver Audi that cost more than I'd earned in 2 years at my peak salary, and wore suits that I knew cost thousands of dollars. I was proud of him, incredibly proud. He'd built a life that neither Gerald nor I could have imagined for ourselves, let alone for our children. And despite the distance, despite our vastly different tax brackets, Marcus had always stayed connected. He called every Sunday, visited for holidays, and sent generous checks that I usually tried to refuse, but that he insisted I accept. Then he met Vanessa. It was late February when Marcus first mentioned her during one of our Sunday calls. His voice carried an excitement I hadn't heard since he'd gotten the Kensington and Rothmore offer. "Mom, I've met someone really special." My heart leaped with joy. Marcus had dated casually over the years, but he'd never described anyone as special before. "Tell me everything," I said, settling into my worn armchair with my coffee. Her name is Vanessa. She's a pharmaceutical sales representative, incredibly successful. She just closed a deal with 3 major hospital networks in the Midwest. She's brilliant, driven, ambitious. We met at a charity gala for the Children's Hospital, and Mom, I knew immediately that she was different. "She sounds wonderful, sweetheart. When do I get to meet her?" There was a pause. A tiny hesitation that I noticed but didn't understand. "Soon, Mom. She's just really busy with work right now, but soon." 3 months passed before that meeting actually happened. 3 months of hearing about Vanessa's accomplishments, her sophisticated tastes, her family's connections, her opinions on everything from modern art to international politics. By the time Marcus finally arranged for us to meet, I felt like I was preparing to meet a celebrity rather than my son's girlfriend. The meeting was scheduled for a Saturday evening in early May at Marcus's penthouse. He described it as a casual dinner, but when he added that Vanessa was arranging the menu with her preferred caterer, I understood that casual meant something very different in their world than it did in mine. I spent the entire day preparing. I wanted to make a good impression, to show Marcus's girlfriend that while I may not live in a penthouse or wear designer clothes, I was still a woman of substance and warmth. I made my famous Dutch apple pie, the one with the crumb topping that Marcus had loved since he was 5 years old. It was the pie I'd made for every birthday, every good report card, every celebration, big and small. I also agonized over what to wear. My closet was full of practical clothes, comfortable things, suitable for a retired administrative assistant living on a fixed income. The nicest dress I owned was the simple navy blue sheath I'd bought for Gerald's funeral 5 years earlier. I'd only worn it 3 times since then, once to Trevor's college graduation and twice to church services. It wasn't fashionable, but it was dignified and well-maintained. I arrived at Marcus's building at exactly 6 o'clock. The doorman in the marble-floored lobby called up to announce me, and I rode the elevator to the 28th floor with my pie carefully balanced in my hands, my stomach fluttering with nervous anticipation. Vanessa answered the door. She was stunning in the way that takes effort and money to achieve. Her black hair fell in perfectly styled waves past her shoulders. Her makeup was flawless, highlighting cheekbones that could cut glass. She wore a white silk pantsuit with wide legs and a plunging neckline, paired with gold jewelry that gleamed against her skin. She was petite, maybe 5'3", but she carried herself like someone who'd never felt small a day in her life. "Barbara!" She air-kissed both my cheeks, a gesture I'd only ever seen in movies. "How wonderful to finally meet Marcus's mother. He's told me so much about you." Her smile was bright and practiced, the kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. Those eyes, dark and assessing, had already traveled from my face down to my sensible shoes and back up again, cataloging and judging in the span of seconds. "It's lovely to meet you too, Vanessa. I've heard wonderful things." I held up the pie. "I made this for dessert. It's Marcus's favorite." Her gaze dropped to the pie and something flickered across her face. Amusement? Pity? It was hard to tell. "Oh, how sweet of you to go to all that trouble." She took the pie from my hands like it was a kindergartner's art project. "We actually have a 3-tiered macaron tower being delivered from Colette's, that new French patisserie that just opened downtown. Their pastry chef trained at Le Cordon Bleu. But I'm sure we can find somewhere to put this as well." The way she said "this" made me feel like I'd brought a gas station birthday cake to a Michelin star restaurant. "Mom!" Marcus appeared from the hallway, loosening his tie. He was still in his work clothes, a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. He hugged me warmly, and for a moment, everything felt normal. This was still my Marcus, my boy, the same person who used to help me roll out pie dough while telling me about his dreams. "You look tired, sweetheart," I said, noticing the shadows under his eyes. "Big case," he explained, leading me into the living room. "We're trying to close a merger between 2 pharmaceutical companies, and it's been brutal. 80-hour weeks." The penthouse was exactly what I had expected, and nothing like the home where I'd raised Marcus. Everything was sleek, modern, expensive. White leather furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. Abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than my car. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the glittering Chicago skyline and the dark expanse of Lake Michigan beyond. Vanessa glided in with 3 glasses of champagne on a silver tray. I thought we'd start with some Dom Perignon. It's a 2008 vintage. Excellent year. I knew nothing about champagne vintages. In my world, champagne came from the grocery store and cost $15 a bottle, reserved for New Year's Eve and the occasional wedding toast. "Thank you," I said, taking a small sip. It tasted like expensive bubbles, which is to say, I couldn't tell the difference between this and the cheap stuff. Vanessa settled onto the couch next to Marcus, her hand immediately finding his knee in a possessive gesture that didn't escape my notice. "So, Barbara, Marcus tells me you worked at Riverside Community College for most of your career. That must have been rewarding." The pause before rewarding felt deliberate, as if she were searching for the kindest possible word to describe what she really thought of my life's work. It was, I said firmly. I helped students navigate some of the most important decisions of their lives. Many of them were first-generation college students, and being part of their journey was an honor. Of course, Vanessa agreed, her tone suggesting she thought no such thing. Community colleges serve such an important function for people who can't access traditional universities. It's very noble work. The implication was clear. Community colleges were for people who couldn't do better, and by extension, so was I. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Dinner was catered, as promised. The food arrived in warming trays carried by two young people in black uniforms who set everything up in Marcus's dining room before disappearing as silently as they'd come. The meal was elaborate. Pan-seared sea bass with a champagne beurre blanc sauce, roasted baby vegetables that probably cost more per pound than steak, and wild rice pilaf studded with dried cherries and pecans. It was delicious. It was also completely impersonal, the kind of meal designed to impress rather than comfort. "This is wonderful," I said, trying to make conversation. "Did you two cook together?" Vanessa laughed, a tinkling sound that somehow managed to make my question feel foolish. "Oh, Barbara, neither of us has time to cook. We're both working 60, 70-hour weeks. I have my regular caterer on speed dial for occasions like this. Her name is Gabrielle, and she trained in France. Worth every penny." I thought about my own kitchen, where I still cooked every meal from scratch because eating out was a luxury I couldn't often afford. Where cooking wasn't about having time, but about making time because a home-cooked meal meant something beyond nutrition. "Mom's an amazing cook," Marcus said, and I felt a surge of gratitude for the acknowledgement. She can make anything taste good, even with limited ingredients. "That's a wonderful skill," Vanessa said, and once again her tone transformed the compliment into something entirely different. "Making do with what you have. That kind of resourcefulness is so important when you're on a budget." The conversation continued in that vein throughout dinner. Every story I told about Marcus's childhood was met with Vanessa's slightly raised eyebrow or a subtle redirection of the conversation. When I mentioned the small apartment we had lived in after Gerald lost his job, Vanessa nodded sympathetically.
"It must have been so difficult, raising two boys in such cramped quarters. No wonder Marcus is so driven to create space and beauty in his life now. It's a natural reaction to childhood scarcity." She made it sound like Marcus had grown up in a Dickensian orphanage rather than a modest but loving home. When I talked about my volunteer work at the Maple Heights Community Food Bank, where I spent 2 mornings a week helping sort donations and pack food boxes for families struggling to make ends meet, Vanessa wrinkled her nose delicately. "That's very charitable of you, Barbara," she said, making the word charitable sound vaguely distasteful. "Though I've always believed it's more effective to donate money to established organizations rather than getting personally involved. It's more efficient, and you don't have to worry about the safety issues that come with working in those kinds of neighborhoods." "The people who come to the food bank aren't dangerous," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "They're families going through hard times, parents trying to feed their children, elderly people on fixed incomes who have to choose between medication and groceries. They deserve respect, not fear." "Of course," Vanessa said quickly. "I didn't mean to suggest otherwise. I just think there are better uses of your time and energy at your age. You should be relaxing, enjoying your retirement, not putting yourself in difficult situations." "At my age," as if 70 meant I should be warehoused away somewhere, useless and invisible. Marcus, I noticed, said nothing to defend me. He simply nodded along with Vanessa's words, as if her worldview had become his own. When dessert was served, the promised macaron tower appeared, an architectural marvel of pastel-colored confections arranged in perfect tiers. My apple pie sat on the counter, untouched and looking subtly humble beside such elegance. Should we try some of both? I suggested, trying not to feel hurt. Oh, I'm absolutely stuffed, and macarons are my weakness. Gabrielle sources the ingredients from the same suppliers as Le Duret in Paris. They're extraordinary. Marcus took one macaron. He didn't touch my pie. As the evening wore on, I began to see patterns in how Vanessa spoke to Marcus and how he responded. She would make a comment about someone they knew, dripping with subtle criticism, and Marcus would laugh in a way that felt foreign to me. There was a meanness to it, a casual cruelty toward people they considered beneath them. Did you see what Patricia wore to the charity auction last week? She looked like she'd raided a costume shop. Some people just don't understand that money can't buy taste. Marcus chuckled. Her husband made his fortune in waste management. What do you expect? The contempt in his voice shocked me. The Marcus I'd raised didn't look down on people based on their professions or their fashion choices. He'd grown up with classmates whose parents worked in factories, drove trucks, cleaned houses. He'd never treated anyone as less than. Marcus, I said gently, that's not very kind. Both of them looked at me with surprise, as if they'd forgotten I was there. Mom, we're just joking, Marcus said, but there was an edge to his voice. Vanessa and I deal with high-pressure situations all day. Sometimes we need to blow off steam. Blowing off steam doesn't require tearing other people down, I said, hearing the disappointment in my own voice. An awkward silence fell over the room. Vanessa's smile became fixed, her eyes hardening. Barbara, I think perhaps you're not used to the kind of social dynamics that Marcus and I navigate in our professional circles. It's a different world from what you're familiar with. People here have different standards, different expectations. We can't afford to be naive about how things work at this level. At this level, as if kindness and decency were luxuries only poor people could afford. I left that evening feeling hollow. Marcus hugged me goodbye, told me he'd call soon, but something fundamental had shifted. I could feel him slipping away, not just physically, but spiritually, becoming someone I didn't quite recognize. The next 3 months confirmed my fears. Marcus's Sunday phone calls became irregular, often canceled at the last minute because he and Vanessa had plans. When we did talk, Vanessa was frequently in the background, and I could feel him editing his words, careful not to say anything that might provoke her subtle disapproval. Then came the engagement announcement. Marcus called on a Tuesday evening in August, his voice bubbling with excitement. Mom, I have incredible news! Vanessa and I are engaged! I proposed last night at this amazing restaurant overlooking the lake, and she said yes! I wanted to feel pure joy. I wanted to scream with happiness and cry tears of celebration. Instead, I felt a cold knot of dread forming in my stomach. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Congratulations to both of you. Have you set a date? November 15th. We found this perfect venue, the Ashford Estate in Lake Forest. It's usually booked years in advance, but they had a cancellation and Vanessa jumped on it. It's going to be incredible, Mom. 200 guests, full formal dinner, live band, the works. November 15th. That's quite soon. Will there be enough time to plan everything? Vanessa's on it. She's already hired a wedding planner, booked the caterer, arranged for the photographer. You know Vanessa. She's incredibly organized, and she has very specific ideas about how she wants everything to look.
Very specific ideas. I was beginning to understand that phrase was code for no input wanted from anyone else. I'd love to help in any way I can, I offered. The mother of the groom traditionally handles the rehearsal dinner, and I'd be happy to. Actually, Mom, we've already got that covered. Vanessa's parents are hosting the rehearsal dinner at their country club. They belong to Lakeside Hills. It's this exclusive club in Winnetka, and they've reserved the main dining room. But thank you for offering. Oh, I tried not to feel stung. Well, what about the invitations? I could help address envelopes or…
We're doing digital invitations, actually. Very modern and eco-friendly. Vanessa found this company that creates these beautiful animated invitations that you receive via email. But I appreciate you wanting to help. Every offer I made was met with the same response. Already handled, already planned, already decided without any need for my input. 2 weeks later, I received my own digital invitation. It was indeed beautiful, an elegant animation of gold and white flowers blooming across the screen, revealing the details of the ceremony and reception. November 15th at 4 at the Ashford Estate. Black tie optional. Black tie optional. I didn't own anything remotely appropriate for such an event. The next day, Vanessa called me directly for the first time since we'd met. "Barbara, hi! I hope you received the invitation. Isn't it gorgeous? We're so excited." Her voice was bright and artificially warm, the tone people use when they're about to ask for something or deliver bad news. "It's lovely," I said. "Congratulations again." "Thank you. So, I'm calling because I wanted to arrange a shopping trip. My mother, Linda, my sister, Jade, and I are going dress shopping this Saturday, and I thought it would be wonderful if we all coordinated." I was surprised and touched. Maybe I'd been wrong about Vanessa. Maybe she was trying to include me after all. "That sounds lovely. I'd be happy to come." "Perfect. We're meeting at Luminance Boutique in the Gold Coast at 10. It's by appointment only, very exclusive, but they have the most exquisite selection. I'll text you the address." That Saturday, I drove into Chicago for the shopping trip. I'd looked up Luminance Boutique online the night before and had been startled by the photos of gowns with four-figure price tags. I had budgeted $300 for a dress, which was already a stretch on my retirement income, but I was prepared to go up to $400 if necessary. The boutique was everything the photos had promised. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, champagne served in real flutes while you browsed. I felt out of place the moment I walked through the door. Vanessa was already there with two other women. Her mother, Linda, was a petite woman in her late 50s with the kind of ageless face that suggested excellent genes, excellent skincare, or excellent plastic surgery. Probably all three. She wore white pants and a silk blouse with more jewelry than I'd worn in my entire life. Her wedding ring alone probably cost more than my car. Jade, Vanessa's younger sister, was a taller, slightly softer version of Vanessa. She worked in marketing, I learned, and lived in a trendy neighborhood called Wicker Park with her boyfriend who did something in cryptocurrency that no one, including Jade, seemed to be able to explain clearly. "Barbara, hi!" X kissed my cheeks again. "Come meet my mother and sister. Linda, Jade, this is Marcus's mother." Linda extended a perfectly manicured hand. "So lovely to finally meet you, Barbara. Vanessa has told us all about you." Her smile was polite but cool, her eyes making the same cataloging assessment that Vanessa's had during our first meeting. A saleswoman named Clarissa appeared with more champagne and began showing us dresses. For Linda and Vanessa, she brought out gowns in champagne, blush, and ivory, all flowing fabrics and delicate beading. They were gorgeous, works of art that would photograph beautifully. "And for Barbara?" Clarissa asked, turning to me. "Something in a deeper color," Linda said immediately, before I could speak, "and perhaps a style that doesn't emphasize the arms. At our age, we have to be strategic about what we show." At our age? Linda was probably 15 years younger than me, but she was already lumping us together as if we were both ancient relics requiring special handling. Clarissa returned with several dresses in deep colors: burgundy, navy, forest green. They were all long-sleeved, high-necked, and designed to hide rather than flatter. "What about this?" I picked up a dress in a rich sapphire blue with three-quarter sleeves and a modest V neckline. It was elegant without being maternal, and it would complement my complexion beautifully. "Oh, Barbara, no," Vanessa said, taking it from my hands. "That shade of blue would clash with the wedding colors. We're doing gold, champagne, and white throughout. You need something that will coordinate with the overall aesthetic." She held up a deep plum dress with long sleeves and a neckline that came almost to my collarbones. "This would be perfect, very age-appropriate, and it will photograph well without drawing too much attention." Without drawing too much attention. Translation, we want you to fade into the background. I looked at the price tag, $850. My stomach dropped.
That was more than double what I'd planned to spend, money I couldn't really afford without dipping into my carefully managed retirement savings. It's beautiful, I said carefully, but I'm not sure it's quite what I'm looking for.
What's your budget? Linda asked bluntly, in a tone that suggested she already knew the answer would be embarrassingly low. I was hoping to stay around $300, I admitted. The three women exchanged glances. It was Jade who spoke, trying to be diplomatic. Barbara, I don't think Luminance carries anything in that price range. This is more of a high-end boutique. Maybe you could try Nordstrom's? They have a lovely Mother of the Groom section with more accessible options. Accessible. The polite word for cheap. Actually, Vanessa said, her voice taking on a strange quality that I would later recognize as calculated pity, why don't Marcus and I help with the dress? Consider it an early Christmas gift. I want you to feel beautiful and confident at the wedding, and this plum dress really is perfect for you. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to maintain my dignity and buy my own dress, even if it meant eating rice and beans for the next 2 months. But I also didn't want to show up to my son's wedding in something that his new family would consider inadequate. That's very generous, I said quietly. Thank you. Vanessa beamed. Of course! We're family now! We take care of each other! But as Clarissa wrapped up the dress and processed the payment on Vanessa's credit card, I didn't feel taken care of. I felt purchased, managed, controlled. The rest of the shopping trip was excruciating. I watched as Linda tried on a stunning champagne lace gown that cost $1,400 and decided she loved it. Jade found a bridesmaid dress in gold silk that made her look like a goddess. They laughed and took selfies and sipped champagne like this was the most natural thing in the world. I stood to the side in my plum dress, which hung on me like a drape designed to cover furniture, and felt myself becoming invisible. 3 weeks before the wedding, Marcus called with more news that landed like stones in my stomach. Mom, Vanessa and I have been going over the reception timeline with our wedding planner, and we've made some decisions about the program. Okay, I said, already sensing bad news. We've decided to simplify some of the traditional elements. Vanessa thinks some of the old wedding conventions are outdated and they would make the reception drag on too long. We want to keep things modern and flowing, you know? What specifically are you cutting? I asked, my voice tight. There was a pause. The mother-son dance. The words hit me like a physical blow. The mother-son dance. The one moment I'd been dreaming about since Marcus was born. The chance to hold my successful, accomplished son on his wedding day and celebrate the man he'd become. It was the one tradition I'd been counting on, the one role I thought was unquestionably mine. Marcus, I whispered, feeling tears prick at my eyes. That's the one thing I've been looking forward to. Just one dance, 3 minutes. I know, Mom, but it's Vanessa's day. She's the bride, and she's very particular about how she wants everything to go. She thinks parent dances are kind of cheesy and old-fashioned. She'd rather we spend that time with our friends, celebrating with people our own age. You understand, right? I need to support her vision for our wedding. Our wedding. Except it wasn't ours. It was Vanessa's, and everyone else was just filling roles she had assigned. If that's what you want, I said, my voice barely audible. It's what we both want, Mom, and there's one more thing about the seating arrangements. Of course there was. Vanessa's family is quite large, and we're trying to balance everything so that both sides feel represented. We'd like you to sit at table 17 with some of the extended family instead of at the parents' table. Table 17? I didn't need to ask to know that table 17 was nowhere near the front of the room, nowhere near where I could see my son during the most important dinner of his life. Where will you be sitting? I asked. The sweetheart table, just Vanessa and me. It's very modern. And her parents will be at table 1, right next to us, with their grandparents and their aunt and uncle. So Linda would be prominently displayed, honored, visible,
and I would be tucked away at table 17 with people I'd never met because Vanessa's family was large and needed to be accommodated. I see, I said. You're still important to us, Mom, Marcus added, and I could hear the guilt in his voice now. This is just about logistics and making sure everyone has a good time. You'll still be at the ceremony, still part of everything that matters. But I wouldn't be. I was being systematically erased from every meaningful moment of my son's wedding day. No mother-son dance, no seat at the head table, no role in the rehearsal dinner, no input in the planning. I was being reduced to a guest, and not even an important one. I understand. I lied. I hope you both have a beautiful day. After I hung up, I sat in my living room for a long time staring at the photo of Marcus that sat on my mantle. It was from his law school graduation, his face bright with pride and possibility. Gerald had been alive then, weak from his first round of chemotherapy, but determined to see his son achieve his dreams. "What would you tell me to do?" I whispered to the photograph, to Gerald's memory, to anyone who might be listening.
But I already knew. Gerald would have told me to be strong, to maintain my dignity, to show up for Marcus even when Marcus wasn't showing up for me. He would have said that sometimes love means accepting less than we deserve because the alternative, losing our children completely, is unthinkable. So I decided I would go to the wedding. I would wear the plum dress that Vanessa had chosen for me. I would sit at table 17 with strangers. I would smile for photographs. I would not dance with my son, would not give a toast, would not do any of the things that mothers traditionally do at their sons' weddings. I would be there, even if barely visible, because he was still my son. I had no idea that the worst was yet to come. The morning of November 15th arrived with the kind of bitter cold that only Lake Michigan can deliver in late autumn. I woke at 5, unable to sleep, my stomach churning with anxiety that had nothing to do with excitement and everything to do with dread. The wedding ceremony was scheduled for 4, with photos beginning at 2. I wasn't invited to the photo session, naturally. Vanessa had made it clear that pre-ceremony photos would be just the immediate wedding party and close family, which apparently didn't include me. Linda would be there, posed elegantly with her daughter, preserved forever in the professional photographs that would hang on Marcus and Vanessa's walls. I would arrive later, after the important moments had already been captured. I stood in my small bedroom looking at the plum dress hanging on the back of my closet door. It had been altered to fit me, taken in at the waist and hemmed to the proper length, but it still felt like a costume I was being forced to wear. The color was beautiful, I had to admit, but the style was designed to hide rather than flatter, making me look like exactly what Vanessa wanted, an aging mother who knew her place was in the background. I did my own hair and makeup, taking extra care to look my best, despite knowing that most people wouldn't even notice me. My hair, silver now but still thick, I styled in soft waves. My makeup I kept natural but polished. I wore the pearl earrings Gerald had given me on our 25th anniversary and the simple gold bracelet that had been my mother's. Small touches of elegance that no one would probably see, but that made me feel like I still had some dignity left. The drive to Lake Forest took nearly an hour from Maple Heights. The Ashford estate was exactly what I'd expected. A sprawling stone mansion that had been converted into a luxury event venue, set on 10 acres of manicured grounds with gardens, fountains, and a small lake that reflected the gray November sky like a mirror. Even in late autumn, with most of the flowers dormant and the trees bare, it was breathtaking. Cars lined the circular driveway, expensive vehicles that gleamed even under the overcast sky. I recognized the subtle luxury. Mercedes, BMW, Audi, even a few Teslas. My 2012 Honda Civic, with its fading paint and small dent in the rear bumper from when I'd backed into a post at the grocery store, looked embarrassingly out of place. I parked in the lot behind the main building, where the valet attendants directed general guests, and made my way toward the entrance. Other guests were arriving, women in elegant dresses and men in sharp suits.
all of them moving with the easy confidence of people accustomed to venues like this. The interior of the Ashford estate was even more impressive than the exterior. Soaring ceilings with exposed wooden beams, crystal chandeliers that looked like they belonged in a palace, and massive stone fireplaces where fires crackled and popped. The ceremony would take place in the conservatory, a glass-enclosed room filled with tropical plants and flowers, creating a garden atmosphere even in November. I found my way to the conservatory and stood at the entrance looking at the seating arrangements. White chairs arranged in perfect rows, an aisle lined with tall arrangements of white roses and gold-painted branches. At the front, a flower-covered arch where Marcus and Vanessa would exchange vows. And there, on the third row on the left side, was a chair with a small, cream-colored card bearing my name, Barbara Reichman. Third row. Not front row, where the mother of the groom traditionally sits, not even second row. Third row, tucked behind people I didn't know, where my view of my own son's wedding ceremony would be partially blocked by the elaborate hairstyle of the woman seated in front of me. I looked at the right side of the aisle, where Vanessa's family would sit. The front row was marked with elegant cards: Linda Chen, Raymond Chen, Margaret and Thomas Chen. Vanessa's parents and grandparents, positioned front and center where they would miss nothing. I stood there for a long moment, feeling something break inside my chest that I hadn't even realized was still intact. This was it. This was how much I mattered to my son on one of the most important days of his life. Third row, behind strangers, reduced to an obligation to be accommodated rather than a person to be honored. "Excuse me, are you all right?" A kind voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to find an older man, perhaps 75, with gentle eyes and a concerned expression. "You look like you might need to sit down." "I'm fine," I said automatically, blinking back tears, just taking it all in. It's overwhelming, isn't it? These young people and their elaborate weddings. I'm Raymond Chen, Vanessa's grandfather. You must be on Marcus's side. "I'm Barbara," I said quietly, "Marcus's mother." His expression shifted, surprise followed by something that looked almost like pity. "Oh, well, it's lovely to meet you. Marcus seems like a fine young man. You must be very proud." "I am." And that was true. Despite everything, despite the hurt and the humiliation, I was still proud of what Marcus had accomplished. I just wasn't sure I was proud of who he had become in the process. Guests began arriving in greater numbers, filling the conservatory with the buzz of conversation and laughter. I recognized no one. These were Marcus's colleagues from the law firm, Vanessa's pharmaceutical industry connections, their friends from the country club and charity galas, the world they inhabited together where I had no place. I took my seat in the third row and watched as the important people, Vanessa's family, filed into the front row. Linda looked stunning in her champagne lace gown, her jewelry catching the light. Raymond sat beside her, along with a woman who must have been Margaret, his wife. They greeted people warmly, accepting congratulations and compliments with practiced grace. No one greeted me. No one even seemed to notice I was there. The ceremony began at 4:15, fashionably late in the way that expensive weddings always seem to be. The string quartet began playing, and the wedding party made their entrance. 8 bridesmaids in gold silk dresses, 8 groomsmen in black tuxedos. They were all young, beautiful, and clearly accustomed to being in the spotlight. Then came Vanessa, walking down the aisle on her father's arm. I had to admit, she was breathtaking. Her wedding dress was a masterpiece of lace and silk, fitted through the bodice and flowing into a dramatic train that must have been 10 feet long. Her veil was attached to a delicate crown, making her look like a princess from a fairy tale. She moved with perfect grace, her face radiant with joy. And there, waiting for her at the altar, was Marcus. My son. My beautiful, accomplished son, looking handsome in his tuxedo, his face filled with an emotion I'd rarely seen from him. Pure, unguarded happiness.
For a moment, I forgot about the third row seat and the canceled mother-son dance and all the small cruelties that had led to this moment. For a moment, I was just a mother watching her child commit to the person he loved, and my heart swelled with bittersweet joy. The ceremony was elegant and impersonal. The officiant, a friend of Vanessa's family who had gotten ordained online specifically for this purpose, delivered a speech about love and partnership that felt more like a TED Talk than a wedding blessing. The vows were traditional, but delivered with the smooth perfection of people who had rehearsed extensively. There was no stumbling over words, no tears, no raw emotion, just polished presentation. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Marcus lifted Vanessa's veil and kissed her with a passion that seemed almost performative, as if they were aware of the 200 people watching and wanted to give them a good show. The conservatory erupted in applause. Vanessa and Marcus turned to face their guests, now husband and wife, and began their walk back down the aisle. As they passed my row, Marcus's eyes swept over the crowd, but didn't seem to find me. He was looking past me, through me, as if I were just part of the scenery. The cocktail hour took place in the grand ballroom, while the conservatory was transformed for dinner. I nursed a single glass of white wine and stood near a window, watching the other guests mingle and network. They moved in clusters, people who clearly knew each other well, laughing at inside jokes and discussing topics I knew nothing about. Recent cases at various law firms, pharmaceutical industry developments, vacation homes in Aspen and the Hamptons. I was completely invisible. In a room full of 200 people, I might as well have been a ghost. "Barbara!" A voice cut through my isolation. I turned to find Trevor, my younger son, pushing through the crowd with his girlfriend Melissa in tow. The relief I felt at seeing a friendly face was overwhelming. Trevor had flown in from Seattle that morning, and we'd planned to meet before the ceremony, but his flight had been delayed. This was the first I was seeing him since the summer. "Trevor!" I hugged him tightly, not caring that I was probably wrinkling his suit. "I'm so glad you're here." We made it just in time for the ceremony. Flight delays are the worst. He pulled back, studying my face with concern. "Are you okay, Mom? You look upset." "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile. "It's just emotional, seeing your brother get married." Trevor's eyes narrowed. He'd always been perceptive, able to read my moods in ways Marcus never could. "Where were you sitting? I didn't see you in the front row." "Third row," I said quietly. "Third row?" His voice rose in disbelief. "Mom, you're the mother of the groom. You should have been in the front row. That's tradition. That's basic respect." "It's fine, Trevor. They had to accommodate Vanessa's large family." "That's not fine. He stopped, clearly trying to control his anger. Melissa put a calming hand on his arm. "Let's not make a scene," she said softly. "It's Marcus's wedding day." "A wedding day where he stuck his own mother in the third row like she's some distant cousin," Trevor shot back, but he lowered his voice. Before I could respond, a voice came over the sound system announcing that dinner was ready and guests should find their seats in the conservatory, which had been transformed for a reception venue. I found table 17 easily. It was indeed near the back of the room, positioned behind a large flower arrangement that partially blocked the view of the head table. No, not head table. The sweetheart table, where Marcus and Vanessa would sit alone, elevated slightly above the rest of us like royalty on thrones.
My table mates were a collection of people who seemed as confused about why they were seated together as I was. There was Vanessa's great-aunt Judy, who was 83 and nearly deaf, requiring everyone to shout their conversations. There was a couple named Doug and Patricia, friends of Vanessa's parents who lived in Arizona and barely knew Marcus. There was Marcus's second cousin, Kevin, whom I'd met exactly once at a funeral 15 years ago, and his wife, whose name I immediately forgot. We were the overflow table, the people who had to be invited but didn't quite fit anywhere else in the carefully orchestrated seating arrangement. Trevor had been seated at table 8 with other young professionals from Marcus's law firm, people closer to his age who Vanessa apparently thought he'd have more in common with. I watched him across the room, saw him glancing over at my table with concern, but there was nothing he could do. The seating arrangements had been set, literally, in stone, with elegant place cards that couldn't be easily moved. The sweetheart table was positioned on a raised platform at the front of the room, draped in gold fabric and decorated with cascading flower arrangements that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Marcus and Vanessa sat there like celebrities at a premiere, elevated above the common crowd, receiving well-wishers who approached to offer congratulations. Table 1, directly in front of the sweetheart table, seated Linda and Raymond Chen, along with Vanessa's grandparents and her aunt and uncle. They had an unobstructed view of the bride and groom, positioned to be in every photograph, to be part of every important moment. From table 17, I could barely see Marcus's face around the flower arrangement. Dinner was served, course by course, each plate a work of art: butter-poached lobster with champagne foam, dry-aged beef tenderloin with truffle demi-glace, and a dessert that involved gold leaf and exotic fruit I couldn't identify. It was delicious and completely wasted on me. Everything tasted like dust in my mouth. Great Aunt Judy shouted questions at me throughout dinner, most of which I couldn't answer because they involved details about Vanessa's childhood that I knew nothing about. Doug and Patricia talked extensively about their timeshare in Scottsdale. Kevin spent most of dinner on his phone, barely acknowledging anyone. This was what I had been reduced to: an obligation to be seated somewhere, anywhere, as long as it was out of the way. The speeches began after dessert. The best man, one of Marcus's law school friends named Bradford, delivered a speech full of inside jokes about late-night study sessions and bar exam anxiety. The maid of honor, Vanessa's sister Jade, gave a speech that was mostly about how beautiful and accomplished Vanessa was, how she'd always known she'd marry someone equally exceptional, how Marcus was lucky to have won her heart. There was no speech from me. Mother of the groom toasts weren't part of Vanessa's modern, streamlined reception plan. Linda Chen, however, did give a speech. She stood up from table 1, elegant and composed, and took the microphone with the ease of someone comfortable being the center of attention. When Vanessa was a little girl, Linda began, her voice warm and melodious, she used to tell me that she'd only marry a prince, not just any man, but someone truly extraordinary who matched her ambition, her intelligence, her drive. When she introduced us to Marcus, I knew immediately that she'd found him. Marcus is everything we could have hoped for in a son-in-law: brilliant, successful, and completely devoted to making Vanessa happy. We're so thrilled to welcome him into the Chen family. Welcome him into their family, as if Marcus was being absorbed into the Chens rather than Vanessa joining the Reichmans. As if our family, the family that had raised him and shaped him and sacrificed for him, was somehow less important than hers. The applause was thunderous. Linda beamed and returned to her seat where Raymond kissed her cheek and Vanessa blew a kiss from the sweetheart table. I sat at table 17, my hands folded in my lap, feeling myself disappearing bit by bit. The dancing began shortly after speeches. The DJ, a young man with a headset and an enthusiasm that felt forced, announced the first dance, Marcus and Vanessa moving together to some popular song I didn't recognize. They'd clearly taken dance lessons, executing turns and dips with practiced precision. It was beautiful and completely choreographed, more performance than intimate moment. Next came the father-daughter dance. Raymond and Vanessa swayed together to a Frank Sinatra song, Vanessa's head resting on her father's shoulder in a moment that was genuinely touching. I could see Raymond saying something to his daughter that made her smile, could see the real emotion in both their faces. I waited, my heart pounding, even though I knew it wasn't coming. But some small, foolish part of me hoped that maybe Marcus had changed his mind, that maybe he'd decided at the last minute to include the mother-son dance, after all. The song ended. Raymond kissed Vanessa's cheek and returned her to Marcus. The DJ announced that the dance floor was now open to everyone. That was it. No mother-son dance. No moment for me to hold my son and celebrate the man he'd become. Nothing. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. Great Aunt Judy looked up at me in confusion, shouting, "Where are you going?" I managed to say, then fled before anyone could see the tears screaming down my face. I found the ladies' room off the main corridor, a luxurious space with marble countertops and individual hand towels that you used once and discarded. I locked myself in a stall and allowed myself to cry. Really cry for the first time since this nightmare had begun.
How had it come to this? How had the boy I'd raised, the one who used to make me Mother's Day cards covered in glitter and macaroni, become a man who could treat me like an inconvenience on his wedding day? I heard the restroom door open, followed by voices. I tried to quiet my crying, not wanting anyone to hear my breakdown. Did you see the mother's face during Linda's speech? It was a female voice, young, amused. She looked like she was about to cry. Marcus's mother? Another voice, equally young. I heard she's been difficult about the whole wedding. Vanessa told me she wanted to give a speech, and they had to shut that down. I pressed my hand against my mouth, horror replacing grief. Really? That's so awkward. I mean, clearly she doesn't fit into their world. Did you see that dress? It looks like something from a funeral. Vanessa chose it, the first voice said with a laugh. She told me she wanted to make sure Marcus's mother looked appropriate, but not flashy. Didn't want her competing for attention. Smart, though I don't think anyone would mistake that woman for the star of the show. She's just so ordinary. They left, their laughter echoing off the marble walls, and I stood there trembling with a humiliation so profound I thought I might be sick. Vanessa had deliberately chosen that frumpy plum dress to make me look ordinary, to ensure I didn't compete for attention. She'd managed every aspect of my appearance, the way a director manages background extras in a movie, present but invisible, there but not important. I cleaned up my face as best I could, fixed my makeup, and steeled myself to return to the reception. I had to survive just a few more hours, and then I could go home and never put myself through this again. When I returned to the conservatory, the party was in full swing. The dance floor was crowded with guests, the bar was 3 people deep, and Marcus and Vanessa were making their way around the room, table by table, greeting their guests and accepting congratulations. I watched them approach table 1, saw how much time they spent there, laughing with Linda and Raymond, posing for photos, making that table feel special and important. Then tables 2 through 10, each stop equally warm and personal. They reached table 17 when the evening was already winding down. Most of the other guests had left, probably eager to get home or to after-parties at nearby hotels. Great Aunt Judy had already been collected by a younger relative who'd promised to drive her home. Doug and Patricia were gathering their things, and Kevin had disappeared 20 minutes earlier without saying goodbye. Marcus and Vanessa approached our table with smiles that looked genuine but felt practiced. This was the end of their rounds, the final obligation before they could relax. "Thank you all so much for coming," Vanessa said, her voice still bright, despite what must have been exhaustion from hours of entertaining. "It means the world to us that you're here to celebrate." "Beautiful wedding," I said, standing up to hug my son. "Congratulations, Marcus. I'm so happy for you both." Marcus hugged me, but it was brief, perfunctory, the kind of hug you give an acquaintance. "Thanks, Mom. Glad you could make it." Glad I could make it. As if I were a distant friend who'd done them a favor by showing up, rather than his mother who would have walked through fire to be there. "The ceremony was lovely," I continued, trying to extend the moment, trying to have some kind of meaningful connection with my son on his wedding day.
We are happy, Vanessa said, her hand finding Marcus's arm in that possessive gesture I'd noticed months ago. This is exactly the wedding we dreamed of. Every detail perfect. I'm so glad, I said, and I meant it, even though the perfection had required my erasure. There was an awkward pause. Marcus shifted his weight, clearly ready to move on. They'd done their duty, acknowledged my presence, and now they wanted to return to the important guests. Well, Marcus said we should probably keep circulating. Still a few people we need to thank before the night ends. Of course, I said quickly. You two enjoy your evening. They started to turn away, and something inside me snapped. Some part of me that had been bending and accommodating and accepting less than I deserved finally broke. Marcus, wait. My voice came out stronger than I intended. He turned back, surprise on his face. Yes, Mom? I just need to say something, just for a moment. I could see Vanessa's expression shift, her smile becoming fixed, her eyes hardening, but I didn't care anymore. I know this hasn't been the wedding I imagined. I know you and Vanessa have your own vision for how things should be. But Marcus, you're my son, my firstborn, and today was hard for me. Being seated in the third row, not being included in photos, not having our dance, it felt like I didn't matter, like I was just someone to accommodate rather than someone to honor. The silence that followed was deafening. Around us, the few remaining guests had gone quiet, sensing drama. Marcus's face flushed red. Mom, this isn't the time or place. When is the time? I interrupted, months of hurt pouring out. You've been pulling away for months, editing me out of your life, piece by piece. I've tried to be understanding, tried to accept your choices, but I need you to know how much this has hurt. Barbara, Vanessa's voice was ice. You're making a scene at our wedding. I'm trying to talk to my son. Your son is a grown man who has a right to make his own decisions about his life and his wedding without you guilt-tripping him. Vanessa's mask of politeness had completely dropped. Maybe if you'd been more supportive instead of making everything about your feelings, you would have been included more. But you've done nothing but complain and demand attention since the moment we got engaged. The accusation was so outrageous, so completely false, that I could only stare at her in shock. That's not true, I said weakly. I've tried to support you both. I've accepted every decision, every exclusion. Accepted, Vanessa laughed, sharp and cruel. You've been passive-aggressive about every single choice we've made. The subtle comments, the disappointed looks, the guilt trips. We've been trying to include you gracefully despite your behavior, but you're determined to play the victim. Vanessa, that's enough, Trevor. Trevor's voice cut through the confrontation. He'd appeared seemingly from nowhere, Melissa beside him, both of them looking furious. Don't talk to my mother that way. Stay out of this, Trevor, Marcus said, his voice tight with anger. This doesn't concern you. It concerns me when I watch my mother being treated like garbage at her own son's wedding. Third row seating, Marcus? No mother-son dance? What the hell is wrong with you? Nothing is wrong with me, Marcus's voice rose, drawing even more attention. The DJ had stopped the music. Everyone remaining at the reception was now watching us. I'm trying to build a life with my wife, and Mom can't accept that she's not the center of my world anymore. The words hit me like a slap. I never wanted to be the center of your world, Marcus. I just wanted to be part of it. Well, maybe there's no room for you anymore. The words came out cold, final. Maybe it's time you accepted that your role in my life has changed. Vanessa, said Marcus, her voice taking on a warning tone, but there was satisfaction in her eyes. I realized she was enjoying this. She'd been pushing toward this moment, orchestrating it, and now it was finally happening. No, she needs to hear this. Marcus turned back to me, and the face I saw was that of a stranger. Mom, you've always been controlling, always trying to guilt me into doing what you want. When Dad was sick, you made his illness all about you, about your suffering. When Trevor moved away, you made him feel guilty for living his own life. And now you're trying to do the same thing with my marriage. Each accusation was like a knife. That's not fair, Marcus. I supported you through everything. You smothered me. His voice cracked. Your version of support was making me feel obligated to you for every sacrifice you made. Do you know how exhausting it is carrying the weight of your martyrdom? I never asked you to feel obligated. You didn't have to ask. It was in every conversation, every disappointed look when I couldn't visit, every guilt trip about how hard you worked to raise us. I'm grateful for what you did, Mom, but I can't carry that burden anymore. Vanessa helps me see that. I looked at Vanessa, saw the small smile playing at the corners of her mouth, and understood completely. She hadn't just isolated me from Marcus, she'd rewritten our entire history, turning my love and sacrifice into manipulation, my attempts to stay connected into controlling behavior. So what are you saying? I asked, my voice barely audible. Marcus looked at Vanessa, then back at me. I'm saying that maybe it's better if we take some space from each other. If you can't respect my marriage and my choices, then maybe you shouldn't be part of our lives. The words hung in the air, impossible and final. Marcus, no, Trevor said, stepping forward. You can't just cut Mom out of your life because your wife has convinced you she's the problem. This has nothing to do with Vanessa, Marcus insisted, though we all knew it was a lie. This is about setting boundaries with a parent who can't accept that I'm an adult with my own life. I looked around the conservatory, at the remaining guests watching our family implode, at the expensive decorations and elaborate floral arrangements, at the perfect wedding that had required my humiliation and now my exile. I understand, I said quietly. I understand perfectly. I picked up my small purse from table 17 and walked toward the exit with as much dignity as I could muster. Behind me, I heard Trevor calling my name, heard Vanessa's voice saying something sharp to Marcus, heard the murmur of shocked guests trying to process what they'd just witnessed. I made it to my car before I broke down completely. Sobs racking my body so hard I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just grief anymore. It was rage. Rage at Marcus for his cruelty, at Vanessa for her manipulation, at myself for allowing it to get this far. I sat in my old Honda Civic in the parking lot of the Ashford estate and realized that something fundamental had shifted inside me. My son had just told me, in front of 200 people, that I was dead to him, that there was no room for me in his perfect new life. Fine. If Marcus wanted me out of his life, I would give him exactly what he wanted. But he would learn that cutting someone out of your life meant cutting yourself out of theirs. And I had a will. Assets. A small inheritance that I'd been carefully building for my sons. Money saved from every paycheck over 30 years, life insurance from Gerald, the equity in my small house. Marcus thought he could erase me without consequences. He was about to learn how wrong he was.
The first 3 days after the wedding passed in a fog of grief and fury that I'd never experienced before. I didn't eat, I barely slept. I sat in my living room surrounded by photographs of Marcus at every age, trying to understand how the smiling boy in those pictures had become the cold stranger who'd publicly disowned me at his own wedding. Trevor called every few hours, checking on me, offering to fly back from Seattle and stay for a while. I told him I was fine, which was a lie, but I couldn't bear the thought of him disrupting his life because his brother had destroyed mine. Mom, what Marcus did was unforgivable, Trevor said during one of our calls, and Melissa and I both saw how Vanessa was smirking during the whole confrontation. She wanted that scene to happen. She's been isolating Marcus from you systematically, and he's too blind to see it. I know, I said quietly, but what can I do about it? He's made his choice. You can fight back,
Trevor said, his voice fierce. You can make sure he understands that actions have consequences. After that conversation, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea that had long since gone cold and thought about what fighting back actually meant. I thought about the will I'd drafted years ago, the one that split everything equally between Marcus and Trevor. The house Gerald and I had bought in 1985, now paid off and worth about $320,000 in the current market. The life insurance policy that would pay out $150,000. The retirement accounts I'd been carefully building, now totaling close to $200,000. The savings accounts, the modest investment portfolio my financial advisor had helped me build, all told nearly $700,000 that I'd planned to leave to my sons. Marcus thought he could erase me from his life without consequences. He thought his success and his wealthy wife meant he didn't need his mother anymore, didn't need the family that had raised him and sacrificed for him. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, Thomas Brennan, who'd handled Gerald's will and helped me draft my own years ago. Barbara, it's good to hear from you. How are you holding up? Not well, Thomas. I need to make some changes to my will, and I need to do them soon. We scheduled an appointment for the following Monday that gave me 4 days to make absolutely certain this was what I wanted to do. 4 days to give Marcus a chance to call, to apologize, to show even the slightest remorse for how he'd treated me. He never called. But on the Friday after the wedding, something happened that changed everything. I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. dmorrison@coreyp.com. The subject line read, "You deserve to know the truth about Vanessa Chen." My hand trembled as I clicked it open. Dear Mrs. Reichman, you don't know me, but I know about you through Vanessa. My name is Diane Morrison, and I worked with Vanessa at Apex Pharmaceuticals for 3 years before she moved to her current position at MedTech Solutions. I'm reaching out because I was at the wedding last weekend. My husband knows Marcus through the law firm, and I witnessed what happened at the reception. I couldn't stay silent after seeing how you were treated. There are things you should know about Vanessa Chen. Things that Marcus either doesn't know or has chosen to ignore. I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm doing this because I watched Vanessa destroy relationships and manipulate people for years, and I can't stand by and watch her do it to someone's family. If you're willing to meet, I can show you documentation that will explain everything. I understand if you don't want to get involved, but I think you deserve to know who your son has married. Please call me at the number below if you'd like to talk. Sincerely, Diane Morrison. I stared at the email for a long time, my heart pounding. This could be nothing. It could be someone with a grudge against Vanessa trying to cause trouble. It could be a scam, an elaborate scheme to exploit a grieving mother. But something in the tone of the email felt genuine. And after everything that had happened, I needed to know the truth. I called the number. Diane Morrison answered on the second ring. Mrs. Reichman? Yes, I got your email. Thank you for calling. I know this must seem strange, but I promise I'm not trying to cause drama. I just think you should know who kind of person Vanessa really is before she completely destroys your relationship with your son. I think that relationship is already destroyed, I said bitterly. Maybe not. Not if Marcus understands who he's married. Can we meet? I have documents, emails, things that will paint a very clear picture. We agreed to meet the next day at a coffee shop in downtown Cleveland, halfway between Maple Heights and where Diane lived in Shaker Heights. I spent the rest of that day and night oscillating between hope and skepticism. What could this woman possibly know that would make a difference? Marcus had made his choice. He'd chosen Vanessa over me, chosen her version of reality over the truth of our shared history. But I had to know.
Diane Morrison was a woman in her late 30s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. She wore a simple navy suit and carried a leather portfolio that she set on the table between us after we'd ordered our coffees. "Thank you for meeting me," she said. "I know this is all very strange." "Strange doesn't begin to cover it," I replied. "What is it you think I should know about my son's wife?" Diane took a breath, organizing her thoughts. "I worked with Vanessa for 3 years in pharmaceutical sales. She's brilliant at her job, absolutely brilliant. She can close deals that other people can't even get meetings for. but she's also one of the most calculating, manipulative people I've ever met. And she has a pattern. A pattern? She targets successful men, specifically men with money or connections or both. She researches them thoroughly, figures out what they want, what they need, and then she becomes that person. She molds herself into their perfect partner, and once she has them hooked, she starts isolating them from anyone who might interfere with her control. I felt sick. How many times has she done this? That I know of? 3 times before Marcus. The first was a senior partner at a consulting firm. She dated him for 2 years, convinced him to put her name on several of his investment properties, and then left him when someone wealthier came along. He tried to get the properties back, but she'd been smart about the legal documentation. He ended up settling for half their value just to be done with her. Diane opened her portfolio and showed me printouts of property records, legal documents, all showing Vanessa's name appearing and disappearing from various high-value assets. The second was a doctor, a cardiologist. She got engaged to him, started managing his finances, convinced him to put her name on his accounts as a partner to help with household expenses. Then she systematically moved money out of their joint accounts into ones only she could access. When he figured out what was happening and confronted her, she broke off the engagement and kept the money. He couldn't prove theft because she had legal access to the accounts. "My God," I whispered. The third was a venture capitalist. That relationship ended when his business partner ran a background check on her and discovered the pattern. He got out before she could do serious financial damage, but she had already convinced him to invest in several business opportunities that turned out to be fronts for moving money into her personal accounts. Why didn't any of these men press charges? Why didn't they expose her? Diane's expression was grim. Because she's careful. She never technically breaks the law. She gets legal access to accounts, legal documentation for property transfers, and she's smart about who she targets. Men who have reputations to protect, who don't want the embarrassment of admitting they were conned by their girlfriend or fiancé. Most of them just wanted to be done with her and move on with their lives. I thought about Marcus, about his successful law career, his penthouse, his savings and investments, about how Vanessa had systematically isolated him from me, the one person who might have asked questions or raised concerns. You think she's doing the same thing to Marcus? I don't think it, Mrs. Reichman. I know it. Look at this. She showed me printouts of social media posts, screenshots from private accounts that she'd apparently gained access to through mutual friends, posts from Vanessa's private Instagram, ones that Marcus would never see because he wasn't following this particular account. One post from 2 months after they'd started dating. Found the golden goose, junior partner at a top law firm with family money and no one to protect him. This is going to be almost too easy. Another from just before the engagement. The mother is going to be a problem. She's one of those clingy types who thinks she still has influence. Going to have to manage that carefully. And one from a week before the wedding. Final countdown. Once the ring is on and the papers are signed, phase 2 begins. By this time next year, I'll be financially set for life. I read the posts over and over, feeling my blood turned ice. This wasn't just about isolating Marcus from me. This was a calculated plan to financially exploit him, possibly destroy him, and I'd been reframed as the obstacle rather than the protective mother I actually was. There's more, Diane said quietly. She showed me records of LLC filings, business registrations, all in Vanessa's name, but using variations of Marcus's law firm's address. These are the kinds of structures people use to hide money or move assets around without detection. Why are you doing this? I asked, looking up at Diane. Why are you helping me? Her eyes filled with tears. Because I watched Vanessa destroy my best friend's brother. The venture capitalist I mentioned, that was James, my best friend Rebecca's brother. He was a good man, a kind man, and Vanessa almost destroyed him financially and emotionally. When Rebecca called me after the wedding and told me what had happened to you, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't save James in time, but maybe I can save Marcus.
I sat back in my chair, my mind reeling. What do I do with this information? Marcus won't talk to me. He's made it clear I'm not welcome in his life.
You need someone he will listen to, someone he trusts who can present this evidence in a way he can't dismiss as a bitter mother trying to interfere. There's no one like that. Vanessa has made sure of it. What about his brother? I thought about Trevor, about his anger at the wedding, his fierce defense of me. Maybe, but Marcus barely talks to Trevor either. Vanessa's been working on that relationship too. Then you need to go to Marcus's law firm, present this evidence to someone there who has his best interests at heart. A mentor, a senior partner, someone who would care if one of their junior partners was being financially exploited by his wife. The idea terrified me, but it also felt right. If I couldn't reach Marcus directly, maybe I could reach him through his professional life, the one area where Vanessa's influence might not be absolute. Over the next week, I became an investigator. With Diane's help, I compiled everything we could find on Vanessa Chen's past. Financial records, legal documents, testimonies from her previous victims who were willing to speak anonymously, screenshots of her social media posts that revealed her true intentions. The picture that emerged was chilling. Vanessa Chen was a professional con artist who specialized in romantic relationships with successful men. She was patient, methodical, and brilliant at finding legal ways to extract money and assets. And Marcus, isolated from his family and blinded by what he thought was love, was her latest target. I also reached out to Marcus's law firm and requested a meeting with Edward Rothmore, one of the founding partners, and someone who'd known Marcus since he joined the firm. I didn't explain why I wanted to meet, just that it was urgent and concerned Marcus's well-being. To my surprise, Mr. Rothmore agreed to see me. His office was in a gleaming tower in downtown Chicago, all glass and steel and expensive art. Edward Rothmore was in his late 60s, distinguished-looking, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Reichman," he said, shaking my hand firmly, "please, sit. I have to admit your call concerned me. Is Marcus all right?" "That's what I'm here to determine," I said to setting my portfolio on his desk. "Mr. Rothmore, how much do you know about Marcus's wife, Vanessa Chen?" His expression shifted slightly. "I attended their wedding. She seems like an accomplished young woman." "Why do you ask?" "Because I have evidence that she's a con artist who has systematically targeted successful men, including Marcus, with the intention of exploiting them financially." I spent the next hour walking Edward Rothmore through everything Diane and I had discovered. The previous victims, the shell companies, the social media posts, the pattern of behavior that made Vanessa's intentions crystal clear. To his credit, Rothmore listened carefully, asking questions, examining documents with the careful attention of a lawyer who knows how to evaluate evidence. "This is deeply troubling," he said when I'd finished. "If even half of this is true, Marcus could be in serious financial and professional danger. These shell companies using our firm's address could implicate him in activities he knows nothing about." "Will you talk to him?" "He won't listen to me. Vanessa has convinced him that I'm the problem, that I'm trying to control his life, but he respects you. He might listen if it comes from you." Rothmore was quiet for a long moment, studying the documents spread across his desk. "I'll do better than talk to him. I'll have our forensic accounting team investigate these companies. If Vanessa is using Marcus's connection to this firm for illegal financial activities, we need to know. And Marcus needs to know." Relief flooded through me. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "Mrs. Reichman, I want you to understand something. I've known Marcus for 5 years. He's one of the most talented young attorneys I've ever worked with, and I've been practicing law for 40 years. If what you're showing me is true, then this woman has found his vulnerabilities and exploited them. That's not a reflection on him or on you. That's a reflection on her skill as a manipulator." The validation meant more than I could express.
Over the next 2 weeks, Rothmore's forensic accounting team did what they do best. They followed the money. What they discovered was even worse than I had feared. Vanessa had opened credit cards in Marcus's name without his knowledge. She'd taken out personal loans using his financial information and excellent credit. She'd created investment accounts that listed him as a co-owner, but that only she could access. In total, she'd accumulated nearly $200,000 in debt and obligations that Marcus knew nothing about, all of which he would be legally responsible for. The shell companies were even more problematic. They were being used to route money in ways that could potentially implicate Marcus in money laundering or tax fraud, even though he had no involvement in or knowledge of these companies. Vanessa Chen wasn't just planning to exploit Marcus financially. She was setting him up to take the fall for activities that could destroy his legal career and possibly send him to prison. Rothmore called Marcus into his office on a Friday afternoon. He also asked Trevor to be there, flying him in from Seattle at the firm's expense. And he invited me, though he warned me that Marcus might refuse to meet if he knew I would be there. We'll tell him it's about the shell companies. Once he understands the severity of the situation, we'll explain how we discovered it.
I waited in a conference room while Rothmore met with Marcus privately first. Through the glass walls, I could see Marcus's expression change from confused to defensive to horrified as Rothmore presented the evidence. Trevor arrived and joined me in the conference room, putting his arm around my shoulders. "However this goes, Mom, you did the right thing. You might have just saved his life." 45 minutes later, Rothmore brought Marcus into the conference room. My son looked devastated, his face pale, his hands shaking slightly as he held a folder full of documents. When he saw me, he stopped in the doorway. "Mom?" "Hello, Marcus." "Mr. Rothmore told me that you brought this information to the firm, that you've been investigating Vanessa." "I had help," I said quietly, "from people who've seen her do this before, to other men, good men who didn't deserve what she did to them." Marcus sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "I don't understand. We're married. She loves me. Why would she do this?" Trevor spoke up, his voice gentle but firm. "Because she doesn't love you, Marcus. She loves what you can give her. Money, status, access. And when she's taken everything she can, she'll move on to the next target." "The social media posts," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "The Rothmore showed me the screenshots, the things she said about Mom, about our family, about me. Like I was just a mark. Like everything between us was a lie." I wanted to go to him, to hold him the way I had when he was a child and something had hurt him. But I stayed in my seat, giving him space to process. "What do I do?" Marcus looked up at Rothmore, then at Trevor, then finally at me. "How do I fix this?" "First, we protect you legally," Rothmore said. "We've already started proceedings to disassociate you from these shell companies and to alert the authorities about potential fraud. We're documenting everything so that if this goes to criminal investigation, it's clear you were a victim, not a participant." "Second, you file for divorce," Trevor added, "immediately, before she can do any more damage. And third," I said quietly, "you decide if you want to press charges. What she's done is illegal, Marcus. Identity theft, fraud, forgery. She could go to prison." Marcus sat in silence for a long time, staring at the documents in front of him. Finally, he looked up at me with tears streaming down his face. "Mom, I'm so sorry. God, I'm so sorry. The things I said at the wedding, the way I treated you for months, I let her convince me that you were the problem, that you were trying to control me, and you were the only one trying to protect me." I felt my own tears starting. "I know you're sorry, sweetheart, and I forgive you. But you hurt me, Marcus, deeply, and it's going to take time for me to trust you again." "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you if I have to. Let's start with saving your career and your financial future. Then we can work on rebuilding our relationship." The next 3 months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Marcus filed for divorce, citing fraud and deception. Vanessa fought it at first, trying to claim she was entitled to half of everything as her wife. But when confronted with the evidence of her shell companies, her fraudulent accounts, and her pattern of behavior with previous partners,
Her lawyer advised her to accept a settlement that gave her nothing. The credit cards and loans in Marcus's name were reported as fraud, and with the documentation Rothmore's team had compiled, Marcus was able to get most of the debt cleared. The shell companies were shut down and reported to the appropriate authorities. Vanessa Chen was eventually charged with multiple counts of fraud and identity theft. She took a plea deal that kept her out of prison, but required her to pay restitution and placed her on probation for 5 years. Her career in pharmaceutical sales was over, her reputation destroyed. Linda and Raymond Chen were horrified when they learned what their daughter had done. Raymond actually called me personally to apologize for how I'd been treated and to express his gratitude for exposing Vanessa's schemes before they destroyed Marcus completely. "We knew she was ambitious," Raymond said, his voice heavy with sadness. "We didn't know she was a criminal. You saved your son, Mrs. Reichman, and you tried to save ours, even though she'd treated you terribly. I'll never forget that." As for Marcus and me, rebuilding took time. He moved out of the penthouse, unable to live in the space that reminded him of Vanessa's deception. He found a smaller apartment in a different neighborhood and started therapy to process the trauma of realizing his entire marriage had been a con. We started having weekly dinners, just the two of us. At first, they were awkward, both of us feeling our way through conversations after months of estrangement. But gradually, we found our rhythm again. Marcus asked questions about his childhood, wanting to reconnect with the memories that Vanessa had tried to erase. He apologized repeatedly, not just for the wedding, but for all the small cruelties that had led up to it. She made me believe that being successful meant leaving behind where I came from, that the only way to fit into her world was to be ashamed of mine. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I let her convince me that you were the problem, that you were trying to control me, and you were the only one trying to protect me. I know you're sorry, sweetheart, and I forgive you. But you hurt me, Marcus, deeply, and it's going to take time for me to trust you again. I understand. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you if I have to. Let's start with saving your career and your financial future. Then we can work on rebuilding our relationship." 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I went back to Thomas Brennan's office. The will I'd drafted in anger, the one that had cut Marcus out completely, sat in a folder on his desk.
"What do you want to do, Barbara?" Thomas asked. I thought about the past months, about Marcus showing up at my door with flowers and apologies, about him helping me fix the leaking faucet in my kitchen and staying for dinner afterward, about the phone calls that had resumed, not out of obligation, but because he genuinely wanted to talk to his mother, about the son I'd lost and was slowly getting back. "I want to change it back," I said. "Split everything equally between Marcus and Trevor again. Marcus made terrible mistakes, but he's working to fix them. And he's still my son." Thomas smiled. "I think that's a good decision. Gerald would be proud of you, Barbara, for protecting Marcus and for being willing to forgive him." 1 year after the wedding that had nearly destroyed our family, Trevor flew home for Thanksgiving. Marcus picked him up from the airport and they arrived at my house together, laughing about something that had happened on the drive. We cooked together in my small kitchen, the three of us bumping into each other and stealing tastes and arguing playfully about whether stuffing should be made with cornbread or regular bread. It felt like being a family again, like we'd finally found our way back to each other after being lost for so long. At dinner, Marcus raised his glass. "I want to make a toast to Mom, who loved me enough to save me even when I treated her terribly, who fought for me when I was too blind to fight for myself. I don't deserve you, Mom, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." Trevor raised his glass too. "To the strongest woman I know, and to second chances." I raised my glass, tears streaming down my face. "To family. No matter what happens, no matter how far we drift, we always find our way back to each other." We drank, and I looked at my 2 sons sitting at my table and felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The year had been brutal, filled with pain and betrayal and discoveries that had shaken me to my core. But we'd survived it.
We'd fought our way through it and come out stronger on the other side. Marcus would never fully heal from what Vanessa had done to him. Some scars run too deep for complete recovery. But he was learning to trust again, to rebuild his life on a foundation of honesty instead of deception. And he was learning that success didn't mean leaving behind the people who loved him, it meant bringing them along on the journey. As for me, I'd learned that sometimes love means fighting for people even when they push you away. That protecting your children doesn't end when they become adults, and that standing up for yourself, demanding respect and dignity isn't selfish. It's survival. I'd also learned that I was stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. Strong enough to endure public humiliation, strong enough to investigate and uncover the truth, strong enough to forgive when forgiveness was earned, and strong enough to set boundaries when it wasn't. The next day, Marcus and I went to visit Gerald's grave. We stood in the cold November wind looking at the headstone that marked where my husband rested. "I wish Dad was here," Marcus said quietly. "I wish I could tell him I'm sorry for losing my way, for forgetting what he and you taught me about what really matters." "He knows," I said, squeezing Marcus's hand. "And he'd be proud of you for finding your way back." We stood there in silence for a while, and then Marcus turned to me. "Mom, I need to ask you something. Did you change your will? After the wedding, after everything I said to you? Did you cut me out?" I looked at my son, this flawed, broken, beautiful human being who'd hurt me so deeply and who was trying so hard to make amends. "Yes," I said honestly, "I did. I was so hurt, so angry, and I wanted you to understand that actions have consequences, that you can't erase someone from your life and expect them to keep giving you everything." His face fell. "I understand. I don't blame you. But then I changed it back. Because you showed me that you understood what you'd done wrong, that you were willing to do the hard work of making amends. And because no matter what, Marcus, you're still my son, and I still love you." He hugged me then, right there in the cemetery with the winter wind howling around us, and I could feel him shaking with sobs. "I love you too, Mom. And I promise I will never take you for granted again." It's been 2 years now since the wedding. Marcus has been promoted to senior partner at Kensington and Rothmore, a position he earned through genuine merit rather than connections or manipulation. He's dating again, slowly and carefully, and he actually asks for my opinion about the women he meets. Not because he needs my permission, but because he values my perspective. Trevor got engaged to Melissa last month, and they've asked me to help plan the wedding. It's going to be small, intimate, held in the backyard of the house I raised my sons in. No expensive venues, no elaborate productions, just family and close friends celebrating two people who genuinely love each other. As for Vanessa Chen, I heard through Raymond that she left Chicago after her probation ended. She's apparently working in real estate in Florida under her mother's maiden name, starting over in a place where no one knows her history. I don't wish her well exactly, but I don't wish her harm either. She's someone else's problem now.
And me? I'm still living in my small house in Maple Heights, still volunteering at the food bank, still baking pies and living my simple life. But I'm not the same woman I was 2 years ago. That woman would have accepted her son's cruelty because she didn't think she deserved better. That woman would have faded into the background, invisible and unimportant. This woman knows her worth. This woman fought back. This woman saved her son from a predator and rebuilt her family from the ashes of betrayal. And this woman sleeps peacefully at night, knowing that when the time comes for my will to be read, both my sons will inherit equally, not because they're entitled to it, but because they've earned it through love, respect, and the hard work of being a family. My son told me I was dead to him, but in trying to erase me, he learned the most important lesson of all. Some bonds can't be broken, no matter how hard you try. And mothers, real mothers who love fiercely and protect relentlessly, will fight through hell itself to save their children.
even when those children are trying to destroy themselves. So, what would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar with your own family? Comment below and let me know. And thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If you enjoyed it, check out the 2 stories on the screen for more incredible tales of family, betrayal, and justice.